lady. I got buddies who died face down in the muck so that you and I can enjoy this family restaurant.
Cause it feels so hectic when my thoughts go bad. Psyche, keep it off me. I don't like it just like that. I've been an angsty bird, anxious. I've been an angsty bird, anxious. I've been a perturbed bird, depressed. I've been an anxious. Is somebody gonna clip my beak? Is somebody gonna snap my streak? Is somebody gonna match my... I got Adderall, they say it's ADHD. What is up, love doves? Little Raven coming at ya in the wee hours of a paddle day morning. It's just a Friday night, paddle day morning. Just got out of work, figured I'd try to hop on the mic and record. It's been very difficult for me to motivate to do so lately because I've been struggling with the mental. But I'm gonna end this piece with a couple things that are hopeful, that give me hope, because I have been inspired and remembered that, like, no matter how gnarly things are, you have to keep fighting and you have to not just give up and sink into despair. It's been really difficult, you know, when I look and see what's happening in LA, what's happening in DC, what's happening in the outskirts of the empire, in Gaza, in Latin America. It's shocking and disturbing, and it seems like even like an amplification of horror, you know, in many ways. And it's easy to get discouraged because there's so many people that are like really trying to shed light and inspire, like inspire a movement or something in the imperial core, so that, you know, we can affect change, so that we don't have to feel so powerless. And sometimes it's just hard to envision like the mechanism for it. But I am going to end on some hopeful notes, because there is always hope, and the US is filled with a lot of like really awesome people that really are like, really do have their hearts in the right place. And it's very it's difficult for everyone all around the world. It's also difficult for us here in the Imperial Core. And not tonight because it's too heavy, but I'm gonna be talking about something I've been really thinking about lately, which is the psychological toll that living under the omnipresent surveillance state, the psychological toll of that. Also, you could also call it the digital panopticon. So I am going to do a whole segment on that at a later time, because I think it goes really deep. The panopticon was envisioned by this British dude, like most horrific things is envisioned by a British dude in like a long time ago. I think it was even the 1800s. And it was designed to maximize surveillance of inmates in a prison while minimizing or eliminating the inmates' ability to identify who was monitoring them or when they were being monitored. So it's like a circular design, and the inmates are on the outside of the circle, and the guards are elevated with lights, really bright lights shining out towards the inmates, so the inmates cannot see the guards, but the guards are able to see all the inmates. And that is exactly how the surveillance state operates now. And now I'm getting sidetracked and getting carried away and getting too into it, but it's fascinating and disturbing that the reason why the Panopticon was like such a successful model for a prison is because it caused the inmates to start self-monitoring, self-snitching, self-censoring their behavior. And that is something that I don't think we talk about enough in the independent media and just in general. Like, that's a difficult thing to live with. And it's also inhumane. It's very inhumane to never know when you're being watched or listened to, and then to still be free at heart, free with your actions, free with your words. It's very difficult, and the whole idea behind it was just control. So there's a sickness, and it's control freakness, freakishness. And I think if we can like talk about it more, maybe it would help people to like understand it and deal with it better. You know, when you pull the dragon out of the, I was gonna say out of the sock, I don't know why, but when you name the dragon, when you identify the dragon loses some of its ability to like instill so much fear and trepidation. So I think just even talking about it is important, and it is really fucked up, and it does take a toll. That's just a fact. And anyways, so tonight I wrote a little short story. It's an allegory. This is an allegory of living inside the Imperial Core in 2025. It's called The Bucket Was Leaking. Clearly, the bucket was leaking. It was plain to see, the water dribbling out from a crack towards the bottom on the side. This was an issue, for the man with the bucket needed it to hold the water so he could water his plants. The community required the plants to be watered, and he had promised to do his best to ensure that they would. Thus, the man set about fixing the leak. He went to the local hardware store, to acquire sealant and duct tape. He brought the bucket with him and showed it to the man who ran the store. "Hey there, I'm trying to fix this bucket," said the man. "Oh, what's wrong with it?" the owner inquired. "It's leaking. Look, there's the crack." The man held the bucket up to display the crack and the dribbling water. "There's no crack there," said the owner. "Yeah, there is. It's right there. The water's dribbling out." The owner looked suspiciously at the man. "I don't see no crack. Now, if you would please, I have work to do." And he gestured to the door. "But sir," said the man, but he was cut off. "Out, now," hissed the owner. The man shook his head and left the store. Perhaps the hardware shop owner was not feeling well that day, or having some sort of issue, or perhaps his eyesight was going. Strange way to run a store, but so be it. The man would just try a different route. He made his way to the Superstore depot, walked in, and showed the clerk the bucket. Water was still dribbling from the crack. He approached the clerk and pointed to the crack. "I'm looking for sealant, sir, to fix this crack." "This what?" explained the clerk. "The crack. It's causing the leak. See, right here. I just need sealant." "Listen here, mister," said the clerk. "You don't need no sealant because there ain't no crack in that bucket." And the man walked briskly away. He was speaking into his earbud as he walked away. The man called after him, Sir, just point me to the sealant and I'll be on my way." The man tried to find someone else to help him, but nobody would listen to what he had to say. They'd avert their gaze and walk away. The man started looking through the aisles himself for what he needed. Finally, after some searching, he found the sealant, but there were two large men blocking the product from his reach. "Excuse me, You need what?" spat the man on the right. "And what do you need it for?" The man gestured to his bucket, pointed at the crack with water still dribbling out. The big men stared at him. One grabbed his arm.
"Now listen up and listen well,"
he spoke in an angry whisper.
"There ain't no crack in that bucket, and you're not getting any sealant. And I suggest that you drop this matter altogether. Do not say another word about that bucket. The bucket is fine. Do you understand?"
The man did not understand, but he nodded anyway and backed away. Very strange behavior. The two big men stared after him, speaking quietly into their earbuds. The man with the leaky bucket felt confused and a bit despondent. His bucket was nearly done leaking, but that was because most of the water had by now leaked out. He figured that today was just a weird day and decided to head home and try again tomorrow. He walked out into the parking lot and started heading for home. A few hundred meters out, he was startled by an angry roar of a van engine. The van sped in front of him and slammed on the brakes. 4 men in masks jumped out and accosted him. Before he could speak, he had a black bag over his head. Then he was on the ground with a knee on his neck. As he lost consciousness, his bucket escaped his grip and clattered away. One of the men scooped up the bucket and swore, "Some fucking leak, huh?" he spat. The man and the bucket was bundled into the van. He hasn't been seen or heard from since. The garden he was tasked to water was bulldozed the next day. The Reddit page created by onlookers to follow his fate has been removed by moderators. Nothing more has been spoken of the event. since that story was slightly dark, because it's dark times right now. And that's actually been a hindrance to my motivation, desire to record, is because so much of the stuff I want to talk about is so fucking dark. And I'm not trying to I'm not trying to depress anyone either, or give way to like feelings of despair either, right? So I was reminded the other day of the importance of always, 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 as long as you still have breaths in you, your heart is still beating, to always keep fighting the good fight and doing what you can, even if it feels like it's not making a difference. And that's like the big one, because sometimes you can't see the differences, but it is a fact that like every action, even every word, every thought has like ripples, repercussions. And just because you feel like your actions, your words don't make a difference, they do on some level. And it was the matriarch from the Miccosukee Native American tribe in Florida that reminded me and kind of like helped me a lot, honestly. It shook me out of my despair mode and reminded me, I mean, there is always hope tattooed on my fucking body. How can I give up hope? I can't. So there is always hope, it's a fact. And there are always points of light, that break through. And light is very, very powerful. All you need is like a little flicker of a flame in a dark space, and it dispels all that darkness. Whereas like you need wind to blow out the fire. The darkness can't do anything about the light once it's sparked, So keep your fire sparked, everybody. It is very important. So I'm going to read you guys an article from El País. This was published 5 days ago. In the heart of the Miccosukee, the Native American tribe that shut down alligator Alcatraz. Now, I know that asshat, Ron the Sanctimonious, he said that they're already planning like another one that they're going to build, and he's going to call it this is the lamest thing ever. He's like, we're going to call it the Deportation Depot. It's almost as lame as the names of the fucking missions, like Hard Dick 2, Promise of Wrath 4. Like the military missions always have fucking the lamest names ever.
Operation Busting Nut. Operation Engorged Violence. Operation Raging Ducklings. Operation Midnight Crusader. Operation Chub Thunder.
Deportation Depot is a lame fucking name. Anyways, this is about the Miccosukee, and they did successfully shut down alligator Alcatraz. This community found refuge from white persecution deep in the Everglades swamps centuries ago. Together with environmental groups, they succeeded in forcing the closure of the immigration detention center built on their ancestral lands. The author is Abel Fernandez. When tourists wearing alligator Alcatraz t-shirts walked into the Miccosukee Indian Village craft shop in Florida last week, Troy Sanders, a 35-year-old member of the tribe who works as a museum guide, felt anger. You have people on the side of the road selling shirts that says Alligator Alcatraz, and they come into the store thinking there's nothing wrong, saying hi, being nice. They have a huge detachment from what it all means to us. The Everglades, the vast swamp ecosystem west of Miami, is meant for our tribes. It protects life, it shields it. It's not meant to detain life, Sanders said. The Alligator Alcatraz Immigration Detention Center, already notorious for the terrible conditions in which detainees are held, was erected in just 8 days at the end of June, just over 12 miles from the Miccosukee people along the Tamiami Trail, the only road connecting Miami on the east coast with Tampa on the west, crossing right through the heart of the Everglades. So in mid-July, the Miccosukee joined a lawsuit filed by environmental groups against national and local governments, alleging that the center would cause irreparable damage to the fragile wetland ecosystem that is their home. They have lived there for hundreds of years and have a connection with that wet, unforgiving land that transcends idiosyncrasy. It is a primal, vital, and sacred attachment. The federal court in which the lawsuit was filed finally ordered authorities to dismantle the site within 60 days. So it did. It ordered authorities to dismantle the site within 60 days. Florida Governor Ron DeSanctimonious assured last Friday that he will defend the continued existence of the detention center despite a judge's order to close it. We got news last night that we had a judge try to upset the apple cart with respect to our deportation and detainee processing center down in South Florida, he said at a press conference, calling the magistrate an activist judge that is trying to do policy from the bench. This is my new favorite thing. Whenever they lose a case, they call the judge an activist judge. I'm like, can I do that? Like if I jaywalk, do something naughty, and then I get detained, can I be like, well, these activist cops need to stop trying to do policy from the street? It's just a ridiculous thing to claim that like any judge that makes a ruling you don't like is like a radical activist. I mean, it's bonkers, and they're trying to normalize all of this, which is why we just can't let it be normal. We have to continue to speak out, and the anger and rage that so many people feel is valid. And I think the best thing to do with anger is to harness it, because if you let it ride you, I don't think that's good. In my life, definitely, that's never been good. If I let the anger direct my actions, but if I can harness it, which is, it's honestly not easy, but it is possible. And then it can be a source of great energy that you can tap instead of having it take you over and make you do crazy shit, Whatever legal future is pending for alligator Alcatraz, the Miccosukee are proudly celebrating another instance in their long history of defending their land. It goes back naturally to the origins of the country they are now a part of. Before and after the independence of the 13 original colonies, which would eventually expand and become the 50 states on the US flag, it is estimated that hundreds of thousands of Native Americans died as a result of the consolidation of the American nation. The survivors were displaced to reservations and attempted to be forced to assimilate into another culture. For much of the 19th century, Florida's indigenous people fought to avoid relocation. Quote, all Native people southeast of the Mississippi had to be deported and removed from their homes to Indian Territory, which was Oklahoma. This included the Miccosukee and Seminoles. Abiaka, a very old Miccosukee chief, knew we weren't going to win this war against the Americans. He took 100 of his people, Miccosukee and Seminoles, and disappeared into the Everglades, Sanders says. And that's why to this day they are still referred to as the unconquered people. The swamps were their salvation. Quote, it was very difficult for the U.S. Army to work logistically in the Everglades, moving their men, artillery, and supplies. That's why we're still here, because otherwise we would have been taken to Fort Brooke, which today is called Tampa, put on a boat, taken over the Gulf to New Orleans, and made to catch up with the rest of the Native Americans on the so-called Trail of Tears, where they were herded like cattle to Oklahoma, Sanders explains. Before having to settle in the Everglades permanently, the Miccosukee were already very familiar with the inhospitable wetlands, as they had been their hunting grounds for millennia. In the most intricate stretch of the rivergrass that stretches out of sight to the flat horizon, each family or clan settled on a tree island, where the ground was high enough to live. There they set up the chickee cooking pot, a kind of open-sided, palm-thatched hut where they kept a perpetual fire. Every family here, every clan, can more or less trace their lineage back hundreds of years to a tree island, Sanders notes. Today, although they don't live there, the tree islands remain the site of traditional ceremonies and are attended by each family. A map of the tree islands is part of the evidence presented in court against alligator Alcatraz. Witnesses warned that the detention center directly threatens 80% of the tribe's homes, 2 schools, and the tribal government building, according to court documents. They also indicated that wastewater could contaminate wetlands and affect the region's water supply, as well as placing endangered species like the Florida panther at risk. They also argued that noise, traffic, and lights disturb wildlife and cut off access to traditional hunting and gathering sites. The ruling by federal judge Kathleen Williams sided with them and emphasized that any habitat damage constitutes direct harm to the tribe, whose identity is linked to the Everglades. This place isn't just a showcase, it's for living, Sanders passionately emphasizes. It's not for putting human beings on display. In his opinion, the immigration jail was a, quote, publicity stunt with political overtones. They put people in cages, in tents, and when they put up a sign on the highway with this clever, funny, stupid name, then people came taking photos like it's Disneyland, he says, anger once again creeping into his words. But the Miccosukee don't oppose the detention center just because it's a showcase for cruelty. For decades, the tribe has been at the center of several legal disputes that have set precedents for how U.S. courts interpret tribal sovereignty, environmental law, and the taxation of Native Americans. In 1982, for example, the tribe sued the state of Florida for illegal land grabs, resulting in the Florida Indian Land Claims Settlement Act, a law that extinguished land claims in exchange for thousands of acres held in trust. In 2004, they challenged Miami's pumping of sewage into the Everglades, a case that highlighted the Miccosukee's role in defending the ecosystem and influenced the national debate on water transfers. Water has been the focus of many of their conservation efforts. The fragile ecosystem has been altered since the last century by urbanization and agriculture, particularly by the diversion of water from its natural course from Lake Okeechobee, north of the peninsula, to Florida Bay, a process that can take months or years. In the Everglades, there's a rainy season and a dry season, Sanders explains, showing photographs. In the photos here, you can see the Everglades in the dry season, people pulling their canoes through the Everglades, people in Oscarts in the Everglades. That was the dry season. We haven't had that cycle since the 1980s. That's what happens when the wrong people are in charge of the canal systems, the levee systems, because they insist the Everglades must be flooded year-round. When you do that in an already fragile ecosystem, of course, everything's going to be not right. The Miccosukee follows strict environmental standards when building infrastructure, and the process of constructing a new home, school, or health clinic often takes years. When Alligator Alcatraz was built in a matter of days, something was clearly wrong. They said they weren't adding anything, that it wouldn't bring anything harmful or destructive to the Everglades. We knew better than anyone that we couldn't believe that, says the museum guide. About 600 people live on the Miccosukee Reservation, spread across 13 smaller towns, all near the Tamiami Highway. Amber Sanders, 23, an ambassadorship fellow for the tribe, shares how they've sought more recognition for their conservation efforts, even though most of the Everglades remains largely privately owned. It's a mission that runs in her veins, she says. This is where I grew up. This is the Miccosukee Reservation. But I also grew up in my mom's tribal village, and I go back and forth to my dad's tribal village. It's a little world of its own. The reserve's main school follows public curricula, but also offers Native American cultural classes. Next to the school is an austere city hall, the police station, a 2- or 3-story medical center, and a nursing home. Next door is a newly opened skateboard ramp where 2 young people practice under the relentless Florida sun. If it looks isolated out here, says Sanders, pointing to the horizon, it's because it is. And the Miccosukee are dedicated to keeping it that way. The Miccosukee woman who inspired me is named Betty Osceola, and this is her talking about the Miccosukee way of life in her own words.
My generation is one of the last generations that had the opportunity to have subsistence living. You know, what we ate, my mother always had a garden. My grandmother took us out into the Everglades to harvest berries. We learned how to fish without a hook. My brothers at a young age learned how to hunt. So whatever we ate, because my grandmother didn't really eat anything from the store, Everything was what we could find from off the land. It wasn't until the later 1970s where we started getting notification about the water having too much mercury and not to drink or eat the fish from the water for more than once a week. So that kind of started changing our diet. So we went from subsisting off the land to having to adapt to more store-bought foods. My mom still grew her crops, and we still got game as much as we could, but we started supplementing it with different foods. And, you know, from my mother and my grandmother, you know, my mother always talked to us about a time when Florida didn't have roads in this area. When she was a girl, all the travel was either they walked. When the periods of high water in the Everglades, they traveled by a dugout canoe. Or sometimes when it was dry, they had an ox-drawn cart. And it was more of a nomadic lifestyle. They followed the seasons where the game was. They followed the seasons whether if it was winter or summer, sometimes it was much cooler to live in the northern part of Florida. And when it was too cold in the northern part of Florida, they migrated down to the south. So it was a seasonal migration. And she talked about a time when Miami didn't exist, when it was just, I usually say just Indians and animals. Well, we still live in an Indian village. I still live in a chicky hut, and as do, you know, my grandchildren. We still cook up over an open fire. We take our children out into the Everglades to harvest food. We show them how the chicky huts, the traditional style house, because we live in one, you know, how they're made. We speak the language in the home. And because, you know, I educate about it, you know, my children and my grandchildren from a young age has been listening to Grandma spill and taking them out into the Everglades and always talking to them about respect and doing the different the ceremonies, trying to get them to participate and also that translates into pride of who we are as a people and not to be embarrassed to live as our people live. Water is life. You can't exist without water. You can exist for a bit without food, but you can't without water. And we understand that water is in every part of your body. And just like any other element of nature, we're taught to protect it. You know, we talk to the water, just like we talk to the birds and other plants and animals. And we recognize and acknowledge if we're going to take water to drink, if we're going to take water to use for whatever, to cook with, just like any other plant or animal, we ask that water's permission, what we're going to use it for. We just don't go and take it. And because it's another being, so we have to offer it that respect. And we also understand that the health of the water is important to the health of everything else on this planet. The fish that we eat, we understand that for it to be bountiful in fish, it has to be healthy. With water, if you listen, whether you're indigenous or not, or anything in the environment, if you just slow down and listen, and if you learn to listen, you can hear it. It speaks its own language, just like that bird is just speaking to us right now. And it speaks its own language, just like the wind is speaking to us right now. And you hear the crickets in the background, the different things. They all have its own language. And if you learn to slow down, observe, and actually listen, you'll start understanding what it's saying. My late mother always told me, if you don't have your language and your culture, you really don't have anything. You can have a house, you can have a car, you can have millions of dollars, but all that can be taken away from you. The most valuable thing that you can have is who you are as a person, regardless of what culture you're in. And that is the most valuable thing. And also, if you don't know where you came from, you're easily led. And she always told us, and even my grandfather would say, you have to know who you are. Otherwise, somebody else is going to come and tell you who you are. You cannot control nature. Nature is there in understanding nature is there to exist. It's not there for you to abuse. The natural world around you, just like you talk about your rights, it has rights. It has the right to exist. And if you want your future generations to exist, future generations of all life to exist, you need to take care of it.
Flow, Miccosukee waters for your sons and for your daughters. Land of the clan of the panther and the otter. Flow, Paheoki, flow. The river of grass must flow. The river of grass must flow. The river of grass must flow.
I mean, it might sound too philosophical, but it's unacting, acting, or acting, unacting. If
You've lost me.
I have, right? So what I'm saying, actually, you see, I mean, it's a combination of both. I mean, here it is the natural instinct, and here is control. You are to combine the two in harmony. Not, if you have one to the extreme, you will be very unscientific. If you have another to the extreme, you become all of a sudden a mechanical man, no longer a human being. So it is a successful combination of both. So therefore, it is not only, so therefore it's not pure naturalness or unnaturalness. The ideal is unnatural naturalness or natural unnaturalness.
Now, another phenomenon in the Imperial Core that gives me a little bit of hope, you got to have that hope, is the interesting convergence of interests between folks who dipped from the Democratic Party for a variety of reasons. I dipped after Bernie Sanders did the thing that Lenin says that social democrats do, where they sheepdog people back into the fuckery. And then a lot of people dipped after, a lot of people were real dedicated to the lesser evil phenomenon. And then they decided that a live stream genocide was a bridge way too far. Like, how can something be more evil than that? So a lot of people dipped recently, and these folks are scrounging around looking for where they fit in the two-party duopoly system, the corporate capitalist system. And like when people talk about it's not a scary word, I promise, socialism, when people talk about it, I think oftentimes we need to have a lot more nuance about it. This is just my opinion, because I'm someone that's like, I want to be realistic. I don't just want to be idealistic. And a lot of people in America really, really feel very strongly about the market. They like the market. And I know that it doesn't have to be like so intense necessarily, you could have like a market with elements of redistribution of resources. I know that a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that and say that now I sound like a social democrat or something, but I'm never going back to the Democratic Party. I'm done forever. I'm never going back. And I've seen how it goes. I mean, the Bernie Sanders thing, they just would have had to like make a few very minor concessions to the working class. And a lot of that would have been held up and fucking whatever. But that was like way too much for the Democratic Party. And they use their allies in the corporate media and the fact that they can just control the whole nomination and election process. And they wouldn't even allow that, And then Bernie, after telling everyone that you sound like you need a revolution, then told everyone that they need to vote for the lesser evil. And so I'm me, You can label me whatever, but I'm not a social democrat. I do find many aspects of socialism to be very powerful and appealing in terms of like, I believe that when people have privilege, they are like, they must share that privilege, because otherwise you start hoarding the privilege, and that creates all sorts of horrors when you start hoarding privilege. And Lao Tzu points out in the Tao Te Ching, he says that one of his verses says that overvaluing the precious invites stealing. That's like a very interesting concept that everyone could maybe reflect on. Overvaluing the precious invites stealing. So just like, there's so much wealth there. If it was redistributed like a bit, people maybe wouldn't feel so threatened that like they're gonna be like targeted or thrown in a gulag or something, right? So I just think, this is my opinion now, I just feel like it would behoove us to start speaking about these things with like an open mind and with a lot of nuance and a lot of compassion. For Sun Tzu himself says in The Art of Fucking War, he says you have to understand the adversary. You have to understand the psychology of the adversary, or else you have no chance. And that's true for everything. So you like, instead of just plowing forward with a vision that is being like, that makes people run the other way, let's find a way to talk about things in a more nuanced way. And so anyway, there's this convergence of interests among people who dipped out of the Democratic Party and believe in redistribution of wealth, and the libertarians in America, there's a lot of libertarians in America, and they converge on many issues, but like the big one is anti-war and anti-imperialism. So I was thinking that a national write-in campaign could so work in this country, a national write-in campaign, because at least that would be like a step in the right direction. I know that this whole process would be very, very difficult, but like the whole being stuck in the two-party thing where both parties are controlled, that's what needs to be like somehow busted open. And if we could, so many people have also dipped out of corporate news and legacy media, because they are tired of being lied to all the time, and they see how much it's like state propaganda. And so you could organize a national write-in campaign using social media. You could totally do that. The corporate legacy media would ignore you and belittle you and smear you. They would say whatever they wanted. But more and more people are, if not totally dipping out of that media consumption pattern, they are looking also to other sources of information. And it's a very messy process, of course it is, but we have to use what we have. That is our only choice. We have to use what we have. And, the whole thing about the internet is interesting, because the internet was created as a military project. And it was created to become the digital panopticon. It was created as a means to like monitor and control, and it was created during the Vietnam War, and it was designed to like monitor the behavior of the Vietnamese to study them better. It's always been intended to be a system of mass societal control. However, humans are all the things: resilient, creative, unpredictable. And this is another reason why I think we have to be so careful with artificial intelligence, because it's trying to make us more predictable, which makes us even more easily controlled. The more predictable you are, the more controllable you are. Luckily, humans are unpredictable, and a lot of us do think outside the box, very creative and tenacious. Humans are very tenacious. So the internet has become also like there's opportunities within it, And getting information out outside of like strictly controlled media channels is a major, major blessing and boon to the possibilities for us here inside the old imperial core. So we could do a national write-in campaign where we just keep the issues very strictly confined to what we agree upon, what these two camps of people agree upon, which again, there's many things, but I think the anti-war, anti-imperialism is the biggest one. So it could be an anti-imperialist platform. And the candidate would have to be someone very unique who is able to like at least be able to have people listen to what they have to say, you know? So not alienating to bring these two camps together. I think it's possible. I think it would be a step in the right direction, 100%, because there's no way we can vote our way out of this within the two-party duopoly. It is so strictly controlled. And it's unsettling to think about like if we don't do anything and this just continues on the way it is, because the lesser evil just keeps getting more evil. That's all that happens. The lesser evil just keeps getting more evil. And eventually on like the really, really big topics that really like impact the direction of the empire, there's like very little distinction between the two. I know there are things that matter a lot, and that's hard. But I think we're at a point now where we have to think outside of it. That's at least start working to think outside of it. I understand if people want to vote for the opposite party in 2028. I get that. But we need to start building potential for something outside of it. Because everything empires do abroad, they eventually do at home. And it's just imperative that we continue to move towards a vision of a place and of a world that values life, that values like the good things in life, and isn't just strictly committed to dystopian control grid, Panopticon insanity and evilness. I think it's quite essential. So that's my 2 cents for tonight, everybody. I'm going to sign off here. And like I said, I'm working on a segment where I just let myself go and dig deeper into the discussing ways of managing the psychological toll of living under total surveillance, because it's tough. It's rough out there. And we've never been like in this position before as a humanity exactly. So it's all new. Like I remember my mom, when I would get really upset with her, she'd always be like, I've never been a mom to a 9-year-old boy before, you know, I'm doing the best I can. And I really get it now. I'm like, yeah, we're always like, we find ourselves in life in these circumstances and it's like, dude, I don't have any experience in this. This is all new to me. I'm trying to figure it out. But I do think that, because I always say mental health is the foundation of everything. And so I think we need to start talking about it, the psychological effects of that surveillance. Start talking about it, then we can discuss ways of managing it, get better at living with it. And someone very important to me pointed out recently that even in those old Panopticon prisons with the circular design and the invisible guards on top with the lights so no one can see who's watching you and when, in that environment, the inmates do have certain advantages because the guards are going to become very complacent just due to like this feeling of control, the feeling of power that they have. The design itself is so well designed, so nefarious, so efficient in its fucking operation that can cause the guards to get lazy, to get complacent. And if you think of it that way, then there's a lot of opportunities for the inmates to sneak around and do stuff. You know what I'm saying? So just throwing out ideas over here. I'm going to leave it there for tonight. Much love, everybody. Just keep your head up. I'm going to keep mine up as best I can. Keep putting out the podcast when I can. Much love and thanks to all my listeners and supporters out there. And be good to yourselves and each other. All right, Little Raven signing out.
With a gift from heaven, tempo 116.7 keeps you locked in time with the program. When I get wild, I'll pile on dope jams, then spit on your flag and government. Cause help the black was a concept never meant. Nigga, please, food stamps and free cheese can't be the cure for a sick disease. Just the way the devil had planned it. Raped and pillaged everyone on the planet and give them fake gods at odds with all law. Love thy enemy and all that hoopla. Here close the words I wrote. Crack cocaine is genocide of black folk. Who in their right mind ever could have missed this? Damn right when you think seditious and I move swiftly. You can't get with me. The 666 move quick but miss me. When I came off involved in conscious. So don't ask why next time I start this.